Hello everyone, and welcome to Classic Gaming Today, where we take a look at the gaming experiences of the past through the eyes of the present. I'm your host Tony, and today we're going to look at another Sounds of the Classics episode, this time focused on Sierra versus LucasArts. We're going to get into that topic in just a couple minutes, but first, as is usual, just a little bit of housekeeping up front. This is episode number 140. I'm excited to be here. I hope all of you are as well. If you'd like to reach out, let me know how I'm doing, provide feedback, comments, suggestions, or just talk about classic games and technology in general, I would love to hear from you, and there are a few ways you can reach out. I have an X account with the handle @ClassicGamingT. I have an email address, which is classicgamingtoday@gmail.com, and we have our Discord server. The link is in the show notes. Discord is the best way to get in touch with me and the rest of the community around this podcast. We have a ton of fun out on Discord. We do weekly and monthly gaming challenges, prizes, rewards, discussions. It is all out there. I highly encourage you all to check it out. I also highly encourage you to check out our Patreon. It is patreon.com/classicgamingtoday. If you want even more Classic Gaming Today goodness, including a Patreon exclusive bi-weekly podcast expansion pack, patreon.com/classicgamingtoday is where it's at. I'd also like to give a shout out to our Pantheon patrons. They are ISO, Rich Senewal, David Morton, Sam Twardowski, Sean Oliver, and Maximus Marshall, Steve Novoselic, Wendell Jr., Chris Snowden, Left-Handed Guitarist, The Bay 101, Toucan Sam, and Marek. Thank you guys for supporting the show. Thank you all for supporting the show, whether you contribute monetarily or simply listen on a regular basis. I truly do appreciate all of the support. For anyone who may be new, welcome. This is usually the part of the episode where I go through the anatomy of an episode, where I talk about the fact that we always talk about the history of the game in question, followed by a pseudo-review where we talk about the graphics, the sound and music, the narrative and or story, if the game has one, playability and controls, and overall feel before reaching a verdict as far as how well the game holds up today and assigning it to one of several categories, with the Pantheon of Classic Gaming being at the top, followed by Golden Oldies, Mediocre Mentions, and finally the Footnotes, which are the games that I have played so you don't have to. But today is not one of our traditional episodes, because today is another Sounds of the Classics episodes. This one is focused on Sierra versus LucasArts, two companies that over their histories had a really interesting, competitive to a degree relationship, primarily in the adventure game space. Now, that's not to say that LucasArts and Sierra Online were both solely adventure game studios. Far from it. They have a huge collection of games published and developed, both by those companies. But I would say that a lot of times when you think about Sierra versus LucasArts, it was really in the adventure game domain that you're talking about, because out of all of the companies in computer and video gaming, I would argue that Sierra Online and LucasArts were certainly the two industry heavyweights that focused on the adventure game genre. So you might assume that this episode is going to be focused solely on LucasArts and Sierra adventure titles. And yes, there are going to be a number of those games included in my personal list as I go through some of the songs that I have loved over the years and the games that they belong to. But that would be a little bit of an invalid assumption to say that everything is going to be just from an adventure game. I love adventure games, but LucasArts and Sierra Online have a huge gamography. They both have a huge gamography, and the fact is that they have great songs across their entire game catalog. So yes, we are going to look at some adventure games, but we are also going to look at some other games that, for one reason or another, stuck with me over the years. Now, a quick note. Anybody who's a longer time listener will recognize that our Sounds of the Classics episodes are focused on games that I have not talked about officially as a core episode of the CGT feed, which means every single game we talk about today are going to be games that I may have mentioned in passing, but have not had dedicated episodes yet. So you should be hearing all new songs for the most part, because some series in both LucasArts and Sierra Online do share some common themes. But for the most part, we're going to be talking about brand new experiences. Film Kid, I believe that I have met and adhered to the rules of the Sounds of Classics format. If I messed up at all, let me know and dock me a couple of points. But I think that I have actually achieved the goal of talking about things that I have not talked about, at least on the main CGT feed. Like I said, there are some songs that are semi-shared across certain series, but I have not talked about the specific games that those songs have come from until this episode. So with that out of the way, we're going to start talking about the topic of the day, which is Sierra versus LucasArts, and we're going to start with our very first song, which is... I'm not sure if everyone is aware of this fact, but before there was Classic Gaming Today, I actually had two different podcasts that I have worked on over the period of, my podcasting career. Over a period of the last 10-ish years, I have had three different podcasts. One is Classic Gaming Today, which is by far my longest running and most dedicated podcast that I have ever done. Before Classic Gaming Today, though, I had two different podcasts, one of which was very short-lived and was called Saved Games, and the other, which predated that one and was my very first podcast experience, was a podcast called Point and Click, an adventure game podcast, which was a podcast devoted exclusively to the adventure game genre. So, with that said, you might assume that I am a major fan of adventure games, and in fact, you would be right. I have always loved adventure games my entire life, ever since I was exposed to my very first point-and-click adventure game back in, I would say, probably the early 90s. I don't think I really played many point-and-click adventure games back in the late 80s. I did play Maniac Mansion on the NES, but that doesn't count in terms of like computer point-and-click adventure games, since it was a little bit of a different kind of format. But I have been enamored with adventure games ever since I first was exposed to them. And as I've played different adventure games, I have gravitated towards a couple of adventures that I have absolutely loved. And one of those games, and one of the games that I don't care what you say, will always be one of my favorite adventure games of all time, is Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers. And this song in particular, and for the record, Gabriel Knight, the whole Gabriel Knight series, is filled with amazing songs. Robert Holmes, who is the composer behind all of the Gabriel Knight soundtracks, is a truly talented composer, and every single song in the Gabriel Knight series sounds amazing. The song that I chose for Gabriel Knight 1, since Sins of the Fathers is the very first Gabriel Knight game, is Wolfgang Ritter. Now, Wolfgang, and I'm not going to give away spoilers because if you haven't played the game yet, you really need to play the game. Wolfgang is related to Gabriel in some way. And just to give an overview of Gabriel Knight, in case anybody hasn't played it, Gabriel Knight is effectively an author, kind of a down-on-his-luck author, not really all that successful. He runs a bookstore down in New Orleans in the French Quarter. And, of course, his focus is on supernatural and paranormal kinds of things. He's written a book or two in the past, and he is currently working on a book on voodoo. And luckily for him, one of his friends, Detective Mosley, is currently working on a real-world voodoo case, and he's able to get some information from Mosley. And of course, as often happens, the whole real-world and fiction that he's trying to write. They come together and Gabriel gets consumed in this overarching adventure that eventually unveils some secrets about his lineage and past and family history, which then drives him to become more of I'll say an active participant in these adventures than what an author typically would. So, without giving away spoilers, that is who Gabriel Knight is. That's the general high-level overview of the game. Wolfgang Ritter, as you will come to learn, is actually a distant family member of Gabriel and serves a critical part in the overall story. I don't think that's a major spoiler to say that Wolfgang is related to Gabriel, because I'm not going to go into what happens with Wolfgang. But what I will say is that when I first played Gabriel Knight Sins of the Fathers, the game was unlike anything I had ever played before. By the time I played Gabriel Knight, I had already played several different adventure games, and for the most part, the adventure games that I had played were all fantastical kinds of things. They were all set in ancient or medieval kinds of settings, or fairy tale settings, or maybe cartoon-like kind of settings, where all of the humor was zany, and most of the adventure game puzzles were not based in reality, but were more based in the pseudo-logic that comes along with many adventure games, and designers trying to make things that are a little bit more challenging than simply using object A on item B and then having something happen. I was very used to the fairy tale whimsical kinds of settings that many adventure games have chosen to portray over the years. Gabriel Knight was different. Gabriel Knight was a much more mature feeling adventure game. This was an adventure game set in the real world, with characters that felt real, with a storyline that felt high stakes but wasn't a fantastic journey across the entire world to save the world. It was a much more personal story. Now granted, there were supernatural elements, but it was really a much more personal story, the kind of thing that you would see in a movie, not necessarily in an adventure game. And it has stuck with me my entire life. After playing Gabriel Knight shortly after it originally released, I was hooked. I wanted more Gabriel Knight. I wanted to learn more about the characters. I wanted to see how his story arc would progress over multiple games. And luckily, I did get a chance to see that, because there are a couple of other Gabriel Knight games, and spoiler alert, there might be a couple more on this list in this episode today. You'll have to listen for those when they come up. But anyway, the song that I chose here, Wolfgang Ritter, this plays at a crucial moment in the game. And given everything that leads up to this moment, and the way that this particular character is introduced into the game, timed perfectly with this music hitting at the right spot, it gives me literal chills thinking about it even today, plenty removed from my last playthrough of Gabriel Knight. It gives me legitimate chills to think about that moment, and it was so cinematic and so awesome and just felt amazing to play. This song, more so maybe than any other Gabriel Knight song. Like I said, every single Gabriel Knight song is awesome. But this song in particular has always been one of those things that has lived rent-free in my brain. It's one of those songs where I can think instantly of the music, the moment that it kicks in, and how I felt during that moment, both during my original playthrough as well as reflecting upon it when I think about my memory of that playthrough. It has always stuck with me. It is one of those songs that for me is almost a definitive piece of the soundtrack because of how it meshes in with the introduction of a certain character and the way that it meshes with the overall story that's happening and the high stakes of the situation that Gabriel finds himself in. It is a true cinematic feeling, and one of those kind of feelings that I had not had in an adventure game prior to this point, which is why this song, Wolfgang Ritter, means something to me, and certainly the Gabriel Knight series in general, and especially Gabriel Knight Sins of the Fathers, the very first Gabriel Knight game, is one of my personal adventure game pantheon entries. We're going to move on to our next song. It is If you are a dedicated adventure gamer like me, you will likely recognize that this song comes from LucasArts' Monkey Island series, and in particular, comes from the third entry in that series, The Curse of Monkey Island. Now, we have talked about both The Secret of Monkey Island and Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge previously on episodes of this podcast. So as I was thinking about music to choose for this episode, I had to make a choice. I knew that I needed to include a song from the Monkey Island series because, oh my God, the Monkey Island theme is probably one of my favorite adventure game themes of all time. I was always a Sierra guy back when I was younger. I played more Sierra titles than I did LucasArts, at least in the adventure game space. But I have to say that the Monkey Island theme is one of the best pieces of adventure game music ever created. It is so perfect in every single way. So when I sat down to make this episode, I thought to myself, well, I have to have a Monkey Island song in here. I had to have something. I originally was toying with the idea of just picking the Secret of Monkey Island theme and calling it a day, but then I remembered that that would break my rule, and I didn't want to lose points with Film Kid, who is our official scorekeeper for any of these kinds of episodes. So Film Kid, I did, like I said earlier, I adhered to the rules. This is from The Curse of Monkey Island, which we have not officially talked about in the main feed of the podcast. Patrons may recognize that I did actually talk about The Curse of Monkey Island in an episode of our Patreon feed that actually ranked all of the Monkey Island games. But independent of that, I have not talked about The Curse of Monkey Island at all. And the simple fact is, as I think about the Monkey Island games in totality, because this is not something, and just for awareness, I did not appreciably play the Monkey Island series back when I was younger. I knew of its existence. I knew that LucasArts was making this series of games with a character named Guybrush Threepwood, and it was a pirate kind of thing and kind of comical experiences. But back when I was younger, like I said, Sierra was kind of my focus. I really enjoyed Sierra adventure games. I wasn't as much into the LucasArts style of point-and-click adventures. But the Monkey Island series was always something that intrigued me. And several years ago, back when I was doing the Point and Click podcast, I did have an opportunity to do an episode on The Secret of Monkey Island. And at that point, I thought to myself, oh, I guess I've been missing something, because Monkey Island was an amazing game. And then, of course, for this podcast, I did an episode of The Secret of Monkey Island, and then I eventually played Monkey Island 2. And when I played Monkey Island 2, that was the first time I had ever played Monkey Island 2, was for the episode of the podcast that I recorded previously. I want to say, I guess it's been over a year now, I think, maybe. Time flies and merges together. I have no concept of time anymore. But what I will say is that when I played Monkey Island 2, I found a new favorite adventure game. Maybe not my most favorite adventure game ever, but it was definitely up there. I mean, Monkey Island 2 is a phenomenal game through and through. So, I had played Secret of Monkey Island and Monkey Island 2, and a little bit ago, maybe within the last 5-ish months or so, once again, I have no concept of time, but I decided, you know what I need to do? I need to not just have a limited exposure to the Monkey Island series, I need to actually play all of the Monkey Island games. I need to understand what all the fuss was about, not just in the original classic titles, but all of the titles that would end up following. So I did sit down to play every single Monkey Island game, and like I mentioned, we have a Patreon episode that is focused on ranking the Monkey Island series, all of the games in that series. But anyway, when I sat down to play the Monkey Island series, as I would often do, I played them in order, because you can't, at least I can't, go out of sequence with any of these things. It would have felt really weird if I started playing, say, The Curse of Monkey Island, which is the third entry in the series, which is where this song is from. It would have felt really weird if I started playing The Curse of Monkey Island before playing Monkey Island 1 and Monkey Island 2. So it was almost like a gatekeeping kind of thing, where I had to play Monkey Island 1 and 2 before I could start playing Monkey Island 3 and beyond. Eventually, I did do that, and like I was mentioning, that's exactly what happened earlier when I completed the Monkey Island 2 episode for this podcast. So when I decided to rank the Monkey Island series, The Curse of Monkey Island was the very next game on my list. And as I sat down to play the game, I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. I had known about The Curse of Monkey Island, and I had known that many people consider it to be one of the best adventure games of all time, and certainly one of the best Monkey Island games of all time, which, having just come not all that long ago from playing Monkey Island 2, to me, felt like a pretty strong statement because Monkey Island 2 was phenomenal, and it was a little unclear to me how Curse of Monkey Island could potentially be better than Monkey Island 2. Well, I know that the debate as far as what game is better between Curse of Monkey Island, Monkey Island 2, or really any other Monkey Island game, that's something that everybody's going to have their own opinions on. But what I will say is that sitting down to play The Curse of Monkey Island was truly a phenomenal experience. This is one of those games that I knew about even though I never played it, because when it came out, it appeared everywhere. It was on the cover of PC Gamer. It was on the cover of so many magazines because the art style of the game was a dramatic shift from all of the pixel-based, kind of pixel art styles of adventure games that had preceded it, for the most part at least, because Curse of Monkey Island looked like an interactive cartoon. There were cel-shaded graphics. Everything was super smooth. It literally looked like you were playing a cartoon. And if you've ever seen an image, a still image of the game, you will quickly see that, yes, it looks like an interactive cartoon. But the still images do not do the game justice. Once you sit down to actually play it and you recognize that, hey, this actually is a cartoon, effectively, it's an entirely different feeling, and one that I was unprepared for just how good it was going to be, even though I had heard about how good it was. And I know that art styles are often a subjective thing, and I have heard different arguments as art styles have changed for different game series, where some people get really worked up as art styles change. And all you have to do is look at Return to Monkey Island, which was the latest entry in the Monkey Island series, to see how there are just a lot of different perspectives and viewpoints on what makes good quality graphics. Because Return to Monkey Island had a very different art style than the rest of the Monkey Island series, and at the time that Return to Monkey Island was being created and before its release, and even after its release, there were a lot of complaints about that general art style. For what it's worth, I'm pretty darn easy with this kind of stuff. I mean, I think most games look fine for the most part. Return to Monkey Island, I thought, even though it was a different graphical style, looked fine. I was good with it. It actually matched the aesthetic of the overall game, and I thought it worked well within that context. But anyway, we're not talking about Return to Monkey Island. We're talking about The Curse of Monkey Island, which had amazing graphics, cartoon quality visuals, and beside that, the adventure game itself, the story, the puzzles, everything else associated with it were really high quality. So, like I said, I knew I needed to include a Monkey Island song here. I didn't want to break my own rules around Monkey Island 1 and 2 since we already covered them. So that meant Curse of Monkey Island was next up on my list. And beyond the music just being phenomenal, just like every other Monkey Island game, it's also a heck of a good game by itself, and something that I greatly enjoyed when I first played it within the last 6-ish months or so. So Curse of Monkey Island definitely deserves to be on our list. We're going to move on to the next song on our list. It is
Mond, meine Braut, singt den Mond an. Der Mond kann euch nicht hören, nur eure Gatte euch alles geben, was ihr braucht. Und eure Gäste brauchen das Strahlen eures Lächelns mehr als ihr den nicht zu verstehen, ich vermag. Es ist doch mein Hochzeitstag. Der Jäger, er beschleicht sein Opfer.
Es ist nur ein Scherz, Baron.
Ich hoffe, Sie fahren. dummen. Euer Witz ist so stumpf, wie eure Schwerter Schmied. Der beschleicht sein Opfer.
I warned everyone that there was going to be more Gabriel Knight on the list, and that is exactly where this song comes from, because we're talking now about Gabriel Knight 2, The Beast Within. Like I mentioned earlier, Gabriel Knight 1, amazing experience, mature adventure game, something that was unlike any other adventure game I had ever played. Gabriel Knight 2, when it came out, appealed to me for several different reasons, one of which it was another game in the Gabriel Knight series, which Gabriel Knight, amazing, awesome. I can't wait, or I couldn't wait to see what Gabriel Knight will get up to next. But probably the thing that put it over the top for me is the fact that it is a full motion video game. And I know that there are tons of critics that have declared that FMV in gaming should never have been a thing. The FMV games from the 90s were these awful reject titles that should have never been made, and that FMV was a way to take interactivity away from the player and focus more so on creating a movie-like environment, something that most gamers did not appreciate. Well, I'm going to tell you, as I've told you many times in the past, that I don't care about those critiques because I am a major FMV fanboy. I love full motion video in gaming. I love everything about it. I love the schlocky titles. I love the excellent titles. I love everything in between, even mediocrity. If it's an FMV game, I'm going to give it a chance because I just love FMV in gaming. I thought FMV was going to be the thing in the gaming industry. And I had dreams back when I was, I would say, maybe 11-ish years old. I had dreams of what the capabilities could potentially become. I had dreams of controlling real-world actors on my computer screen and having the technology be so advanced that I'd be able to do anything and they would respond to my inputs like they were a real character, but I had control of all of the action. It captured my imagination, and that I think is why FMV, or one of the reasons why FMV and gaming really appealed to me. Now, granted, we never really got to that kind of setup with FMV and gaming. The technology simply wasn't there. But regardless, Gabriel Knight 2, as the second entry in the Gabriel Knight series, would do something very different than Gabriel Knight 1. Gabriel Knight 1 was a very traditional point-and-click adventure game. It used a pixel art, hand-drawn style, and it was pretty darn realistic within the context of pixel art. Gabriel Knight 2 was a full-motion video game, and I will be honest, when I first started playing Gabriel Knight 2, the actor that played Gabriel Knight, Dean Erickson, did not resonate with me at all. When I played the original Gabriel Knight, and this might sound like, I don't know what, it might sound like heresy, but when I played the original Gabriel Knight Sins of the Fathers, I did not play the talkie version. I played the version with simple text, and as I've talked about many times in the past, I am generally the kind of person that enjoys to act things out. My brother and I used to play adventure games and RPGs and those kind of games next to each other. We used to play them together. And whenever there was something to be acted out, or whenever there was a speech bubble on the screen, or whenever there was text to be read, we would often act out those scenes. So for Gabriel Knight Sins of the Fathers, I was the guy playing the game, because back then also I was the Sierra guy. My brother was the LucasArts guy. So I'd be the main driver for the Sierra games. My brother would be the main driver for the LucasArts games. But when we played Gabriel Knight, I was the voice of Gabriel Knight. So as we played Sins of the Fathers, I was the guy that acted out the Gabriel Knight scenes. And yes, you might argue that Tim Curry is probably a better voice actor than I was back when I was younger. But it didn't matter, because I didn't know anything else. I just knew the way I interpreted Gabriel Knight. So when Gabriel Knight 2 came out and I saw this new actor, Dean Erickson, playing the character, playing Gabriel Knight, I thought to myself, what the heck is this? I don't know that I like this. Even though I like FMV and gaming, he didn't match my representation of Gabriel Knight. Now, over time, I would get over that, because Gabriel Knight 2 as a game was so good. I loved that game. I loved the dueling storylines between Gabriel and Grace Nakamura, who is Gabriel's kind of pseudo-assistant, almost girlfriend kind of character. But I loved it. I loved how it transitioned back and forth between Gabriel's focus on a real-world mystery happening today, and the way that mystery could potentially tie into real-world history that Grace was examining and researching throughout the game. I loved that. And one of the reasons why I love the Gabriel Knight series, by the way, is the fact that Jane Jensen, who is the designer behind the Gabriel Knight series, she married real world history, lore, religion, whatever. She married the real world with the game. So much so that in Gabriel Knight 2, which is, like I said, full motion video, if you went to Germany, you would actually see real-world locations that were captured in the game. And there are a number of different individuals who have posted out on YouTube or on Reddit or wherever pictures and videos of them visiting the real-world locations that Gabriel Knight 2 utilized. They took a tour of Germany and they went on the Gabriel Knight tour effectively, and they have all these different pictures, and I just think that is awesome. I love when a game blurs the line between reality and fiction. And that is exactly what Jane Jensen has done throughout the entire Gabriel Knight series. And Gabriel Knight 2 in particular, because of being full motion video, really blurred that line, and it made it feel so real. And beyond that, and because we're talking music, we're not just talking games, we're talking music during this episode. The fact is that Gabriel Knight 2 also, and I'm not going to give away spoilers once again, but within the lore of the game, it comes to light that there is a certain opera that has been hidden or lost and is eventually found and performed within the game itself. And the song I chose is from that pseudo-lost opera. Now, obviously, it's not really a lost opera. This is, once again, composed by Robert Holmes, and he does a phenomenal job with this song as well. But I thought it was the coolest thing. I'm playing the game. I'm enjoying the game for what it is. And then you reach this point in the game, and you're actually listening to a real-world opera composed for a video game. And at the time, that blew my mind. I thought, what kind of dedication and focus would be required to actually score a real opera for inclusion in the game? It surprised me, and actually seeing the opera performed in full motion video glory was unlike anything I had ever expected in a game. This felt so much like a movie. It felt like controlling the action in a movie, and it just totally enthralled me, and is one of those reasons why Gabriel Knight continues to be one of my favorite characters and favorite series in all of gaming, because I felt like every time Gabriel Knight appeared on the screen, every time a Gabriel Knight game was made, it was always trying to push the boundaries of what interactive entertainment was possible, or what was possible with interactive entertainment. It was one of those things that I adore. I mean, there's no stronger word I could use. I adore the Gabriel Knight series, and Gabriel Knight 2 was probably one of my favorite experiences in the series because it married so many things that I loved and just created something that, for me, is a true masterpiece. We're going to move on to our next game on the list, and like we were doing before, this is going to be a LucasArts title. So that song is It has been widely discussed that Grim Fandango might be one of the best adventure games of all time. LucasArts, over the period of its lifetime, or over the period of its career, had always tried to change things up, and it always tried to evolve, especially in the adventure game genre. And you can look just at the Scum engine, the script creation utility for Maniac Mansion, and see how the technology behind that engine evolved over the years to become something more. By the time that Grim Fandango came out, the Scum engine was unfortunately effectively retired because LucasArts was moving into 3D technology. And as I look at this list, and I promise, like I said, we're not just going to talk about adventure games, but as I look at my list of adventure games, and there is at least one more, actually there is one more adventure game we'll talk about after Grim Fandango. But as I look at my list of 6 adventure games that I have to start this episode, it strikes me that, and this was not planned, every single adventure game represented an evolution of effectively the history of the adventure game genre. We started by talking about Gabriel Knight Sins of the Fathers, which was a very traditional pixel art styled game. We moved to Curse of Monkey Island, which was focused on cartoon-styled visuals, cel-shaded graphics, which didn't feel like pixel art, but literally felt like an interactive cartoon. Gabriel Knight 2, The Beast Within, was a full-motion video game utilizing real-world actors and digitized scenes. Grim Fandango is our first leap into 3D gaming, and this is LucasArts' take at a 3D adventure game. The story of Grim Fandango draws heavily upon real-world cultural beliefs, predominantly in places like Mexico, about what happens after an individual dies. What is their journey, their afterlife kind of journey? And the fact is that if you've ever played Grim Fandango, you will recognize that it is an excellent marriage of real-world cultural influences with the general style of LucasArts comedy and adventure game prowess that has made LucasArts one of the best adventure game development studios of all time. If you've never played Grim Fandango, but you have seen the Pixar movie Coco, you can kind of see parallels there, at least from a cultural perspective. So if anybody has seen that movie but hasn't played Grim Fandango, it's a very similar kind of concept, at least from a cultural perspective. Anyway, we're not going to talk about the culture and the history behind the game today. What I want to focus on is Grim Fandango the game and what it made me feel when I first started playing it when it originally released. Well, like I had mentioned, when my brother and I were younger, we often traded off between LucasArts and Sierra Adventure titles. At the point that Grim Fandango came out, we weren't doing every single adventure game, or we weren't playing every single adventure game together anymore. We were kind of a little bit older, so we started doing things a little bit more apart, so to speak. Not to say that we grew apart, but just it wasn't one of those things where we had to sit together every time an adventure game came out and play through it. So Grim Fandango is actually a game that I played solo when it originally came out. And I remember when I first started playing the game and I started trying to navigate these 3D environments. And this is coming from the perspective of somebody who up to this point had really only played point and click adventures. So I sat down and I started playing Grim Fandango and I thought to myself, how the heck do I control this? Because it was a very different kind of experience. This was something where I had some experience with 3D gameplay based on playing on video game consoles, but Grim Fandango was a very different adventure game experience. And when I first started playing the game, I legitimately thought to myself, I don't know if I like this. I don't know if I like this control scheme. I don't know if I like the leap to 3D gameplay in the adventure game genre. Give me the traditional point and click kind of thing, because this wasn't really point and click so much. It was, you were moving around the screen using the arrow keys on your keyboard. As you would pass by a certain hotspot, your character would look down at it, which I guess was kind of cool because it kind of showed you where certain things were, or where interactive elements in the environment were. But regardless, it just didn't feel like a traditional point and click adventure game. And when I first started playing, I thought to myself, I don't know this is going to be a good game. I think I'm out. I don't think this is going to stick with me. Well, it only took around, I want to say, an hour of getting used to the gameplay, the overall controls, and the style of the game before I realized, no, this is actually a really darn good game. It's really, really good. And I played through Grim Fandango in its entirety back when it originally released. I've played through it a few times since then, including the, I don't know if it's a remaster. Is it a remaster that came out? It's not a remake, so it must be a remaster that came out several years ago. And it's just a good game. Yes, the controls are a little finicky. Yes, there are some puzzles that can be pretty darn challenging, but if I take a step back and look at it, Grim Fandango is a phenomenal adventure game. And even beyond that, one of the things that has always stuck with me is the quality of the music. And this is something I've thought about in the past, just kind of thinking about composers, both for film and video games and whatever else, whatever composers compose for. You know how a lot of times you might look at somebody and they have a very specific skill set. They're a master at a very specific domain. Well, there are also other people who are a master of that domain, but can apply that mastery to any number of potential options. So think about something like a film composer. Think about like a John Williams. John Williams, I believe, can probably write any piece of music he would want, in any style that he would want. But he is primarily an orchestral kind of composer. You have other composers who have varied their styles dramatically, and especially in the video game industry, where most times games are very, very different from one to the next, you have varying styles that you have to be ready to compose for. And when you look at a game like Grim Fandango, which pulls so heavily from Mexican, Spanish kind of styled music, and you compare that to, say, any other LucasArts games, compare it to Secret of Monkey Island with the Caribbean kind of themes, compare it to Star Wars with the John Williams orchestral kind of stuff, or even Indiana Jones with the orchestral kinds of stuff, and any other game, the zany Day of the Tentacle kinds of soundtrack. And you think about all these different games, their styles vary dramatically. Their musical stylings are very, very different. And when you consider that the majority of those games were composed by 1, 2, or 3 of the same people that were effectively the genius stable of composers within the LucasArts gaming division, it's just insane to think about. And you think of a game like Grim Fandango and you listen to that song that we just played and you compare it to any of the other LucasArts songs, there's no similarity there, other than being a very high quality song. So the Grim Fandango soundtrack is one that has always stuck with me because it was just so different. It felt so different than most of the other LucasArts games. It wasn't really zany. It wasn't really orchestral. It was drawn from real world musical styles and different genres of music, but it felt perfect. It meshed perfectly with the game, with the storyline of the game, with everything that was going on within the game world itself. And it just felt like it was about as professional of an experience. And I use that term, maybe that's the wrong term, because obviously video game composition is a professional kind of occupation. But what I mean is it felt like it transcended game, the whole concept of being a game. It felt like it transcended being created for a game. It was that high quality. It felt like something that you would see very easily in a feature film because it was just so good. Not to mention the fact that Grim Fandango, the game, would end up being so good as well. It was one of those games that did not grab me right away, but over time, I really came to appreciate. And eventually I did play through it. Like I mentioned, I played through it in its entirety back when I was younger, played through it in its entirety a couple times since then. And every time I play it, I'm always impressed with what LucasArts was able to accomplish there. Their first, or one of their first forays into 3D adventure gaming. It might have been their first. I'm trying to think timing wise. I'm going to say yes, it's probably their first 3D adventure game. If anybody knows otherwise, or if I'm misspeaking, definitely let me know. But I believe it was their first 3D adventure game. Grim Fandango, definitely different. A very different experience from a gameplay perspective than all of the LucasArts adventures that had preceded it, but no less of a quality experience. And the music for Grim Fandango, wow. I have no words. It is simply amazing. We're going to move on to our next game on the list. It is I did warn you that there was going to be more Gabriel Knight on the list, and of course there is another Gabriel Knight song because there is another Gabriel Knight game, and this one is from Gabriel Knight 3, Blood of the Sacred, Blood of the Damned. Now we got to talk about Gabriel Knight 3 because this is one of those games that has a very divided opinion. And I will say, just so everybody has awareness, I have always really enjoyed Gabriel Knight 3. I remember playing it over the winter one year when it was released. I can't remember exactly when it was released. It was the later 90s, I believe. But I remember playing through it in the winter with the snow outside and trying to just figure out all of the mysteries behind Rennes-le-Chateau and all of the different things that were happening within the game. This is one of those games that, once again, combined real-world lore, history, mythology with an in-game fictionalized setting. And it was so good. And the Gabriel Knight series in general has been so good that every time I've played a Gabriel Knight game, it made me want to learn more about the real world. I played Gabriel Knight 1, I wanted to learn more about voodoo. Played Gabriel Knight 2, I wanted to learn more about Mad King Ludwig and the whole Neuschwanstein castle and all that kind of stuff. I just loved it. The whole Richard Wagner. I wanted to learn more about that. Gabriel Knight 3, I wanted to learn more about Rennes-le-Chateau. And I remember, this is a very crystal clear memory. When I was in college, I attended Drexel University as my undergrad. And I was part of the honors program at Drexel University. And I would go into the honors lounge, which was kind of like this. It was not a huge room, but it kind of felt exclusive because it had a keypad on the door and you had to be part of the honors program to get into the lounge. And I thought I was really cool to be part of that. So I would go into the honors lounge between classes. And I would go onto the internet and I would go to this one site, and I need to check if it's still out there because I literally haven't thought about this in years. But I would go out to this one website, which was basically, it wasn't tied to Gabriel Knight at all, but it was all focused on the history of Rennes-le-Chateau and the mystery behind Rennes-le-Chateau. And all of the things that I had experienced in Gabriel Knight 3 were on this webpage. And it was this exhaustive research about everything and hidden geographies and geometries and all this kind of stuff. And I was enthralled. So I ended up printing out, I literally sat there in the honors lounge and printed out pretty much the entire website. This was several hundred pages worth of documentation that I printed out. And I thought, well, I'm in the lounge. I might as well. So I printed out a ton of stuff and I would read it in between classes. And it was just, it gripped me. The storyline behind Gabriel Knight 3 gripped me and I loved it. And the music within the game, once again, Robert Holmes did an amazing job composing music for Gabriel Knight 3. Now, the gameplay in Gabriel Knight 3 and some of the puzzles, I've always considered Jane Jensen to be an excellent video game designer, an excellent adventure game designer. Even I can't argue with the fact that the cat hair mustache puzzle in Gabriel Knight 3, no, I'm sorry. No, I can't. I want to forgive it because it's part of a beloved series that I absolutely, literally love. And I want to say, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's not that big a deal. It's fine within the context of the world. And then I think to myself, no, I can't give it a pass. The cat hair mustache puzzle. No, it's not a great puzzle at all. But there are other really interesting puzzles throughout Gabriel Knight 3. And one of the things that Gabriel Knight 3 did really well was it had an overarching puzzle across the entirety of the game. So this is one of those titles where it has probably one of the worst puzzles in adventure game history, that being the cat hair mustache thing. But it also has one of the best puzzles ever in an adventure game, which is the whole La Serpent Rouge kind of puzzle and how that fits together with everything throughout the game world. It is full of very high highs and some pretty low lows. But regardless, I still love Gabriel Knight 3. And beyond the gameplay and the puzzles and the story, all of which at the end of the day I really do enjoy, the music once again is a standout. And the piece that I chose, which is entitled Nocturne, is another example of Robert Holmes drawing upon classical influences to deliver a song that just feels right. And I could picture this song being played as though it were composed by a true classical composer. That's how much I love this song. This is one of those songs that I decided to learn on the piano because, and this is something I've mentioned before, but when a song really impresses me, I automatically think to myself, well, hey, I got to play that. I literally go over to the piano and start picking it out because I just loved it. And the songs here are amazing. Nocturne is probably my favorite Gabriel Knight 3 piece. Oh, I hadn't thought about this in a while. Outside of the Nocturne piece that we just played, Gabriel Knight 3, back before it came out, had a trailer with some really cool music that started like doo-doo-doo-doo. And actually, if anybody ever listened to the very first Patreon episode that we did, which was the sequels that never came, or listened to the brief preview for that, which actually was part of the, I can't remember what episode it was of the main feed, but after the end of the main feed, before that Patreon episode came out, I actually included a several minute preview. The song that plays at the very beginning of that Patreon episode is the song from the Gabriel Knight 3 trailer. I loved that song so much that when I was in high school, there was a class I took, which was interactive music. I think it was something like interactive music composition and theory or something like that, which was basically a MIDI music class, musical instrument for digital interface class. And I've talked before about the fact that I love MIDI music. I love synthesis-based music and all that kind of stuff. And one of the assignments was you need to create an advertisement. You need to create an advertisement for something. And I decided to myself, well, I'm going to create an advertisement for Gabriel Knight 3. So I actually recreated the trailer. I did a little bit of a modification, but I recreated the trailer music for Gabriel Knight 3 for that class and recorded my own voiceover. I wonder if I could find that recording anywhere. It's got to exist somewhere. I think I might have it on an audio cassette somewhere. And if I could find it, I promise you I will play it for you, because this was high school me sort of composing, but pretty much just recreating music that Robert Holmes had created for the trailer of the game, and then me providing a voiceover for the pseudo advertisement that was part of the project that I was working with. I haven't thought about that memory in a long time, but that's the kind of stuff that music can sometimes inspire and games can sometimes inspire. It inspires you in the real world, and I was certainly inspired. And say what you will about Gabriel Knight 3 and some of its puzzles and all that kind of stuff. The fact is, the music in Gabriel Knight 3, simply superb. And I cannot say enough good things about what Robert Holmes did for that particular series. We're going to move on to the next song on the list. We are done with adventure games. I know, I'm sad too. But we're going to move on to the next song on the list. It is... I mentioned before that both LucasArts and Sierra Online had a number of different games that were outside of their adventure game roots. And one of those games that for LucasArts was one of the things that I absolutely loved back when it first came out is Indiana Jones' Greatest Adventures for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. I've talked before about how the transition from 8-bit to 16-bit graphics created a really interesting psychological shift, at least in my brain, because going from 8-bit pixely graphics to 16-bit semi-digitized, much more quote-unquote real graphics really made it feel like you were experiencing the future. I remember looking at these 16-bit games like Super Star Wars and Indiana Jones' Greatest Adventures, and thinking to myself, oh, that's almost real. I could almost squint my eyes and that looks like Harrison Ford on the screen running around that I'm actually controlling. Now, the reality is that if you look at the 16-bit titles today, they don't approach anything resembling realism. But back then, they really did. They felt really real. And I remember when Indiana Jones' Greatest Adventures came out. At this point, I was a full Indiana Jones fanboy. I was an Indiana Jones fanboy ever since I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. I loved Temple of Doom. I believe we even saw Temple of Doom in the movie theater, which I was fairly young for, now that I think about it. But I loved it anyway. It wasn't one of those, I know people have said before that Temple of Doom is a much darker story and a little scary for children and things like that. I don't know, maybe I was just weird, but I really enjoyed it and I loved watching it. We certainly saw Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade in the movie theater. And I remember even before the movie started with was it a Coca-Cola commercial or was it a Pepsi commercial? Oh, geez, now I can't remember. With the knight at the end saying, "You have chosen wisely," or whatever. I can't remember. Was it Coke or Pepsi? Darn it. I can't remember now. Oh, that's gonna wreck me. Anyway, I will have to look at that after I finish this recording. But regardless, I loved Indiana Jones. And I had played a number of Indiana Jones games before. Primarily, I played Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom on the NES. And it was kind of a home version of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, the arcade game, which I spent way too many quarters on trying to beat that one. But I played the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom NES game for a lot of hours, many hours. I played that one a lot. And it was interesting. There was kind of, I guess it was a glitch maybe in that game, or maybe it was a glitch on my game where I'm trying to remember exactly how it worked, but let's say you got up to, I think like stage 8 or stage 9, which was fairly late in the game. Let's say you turned the game off, and let's say when you went to turn the game back on, you hit power, but then you hit reset a couple times. It would sometimes drop you off right back where you were. And I don't believe the game had any sort of battery backup, or maybe it was just coincidental that it would drop you into this area of the game. But I remember distinctly being able to hit the reset button or toggle something and being able to jump right back to where I was in the game. And I thought to myself, well, this is kind of cool. It's kind of like a pseudo save state or a pseudo saved game, even though the game itself didn't provide saves. Anyway, I've played a lot of Indiana Jones games. When Indiana Jones' Greatest Adventures came out on the Super Nintendo, I knew I was going to get it day one because I loved Indiana Jones and I've loved Indiana Jones games for as long as I could remember. But nothing prepared me for just how awesome that game was. I remember thinking about the fact that it had all 3 Indiana Jones games included in some capacity and thinking to myself, I can actually play through Indiana Jones, the entire trilogy. I can play through the whole thing. I can be Indiana Jones. I can experience everything that Indiana Jones had to offer. And let me tell you, it was an amazing experience. One of the things that always impressed me with the Super Nintendo in particular, and certain development studios with the Super Nintendo, was the fact that with the advanced sound capabilities that came with the Super NES, especially in comparison to 8-bit systems, there was such a jump in audio quality. So much so that I honestly believed that a lot of these songs felt orchestrated. They felt orchestral. It almost felt like digital audio in comparison to the NES, which had fairly limited sound hardware, at least in comparison to the Super NES. But the Super NES, there were some composers, there were some development studios that could really make the Super Nintendo sound great. Think about companies like Square with their RPGs like Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger, and how good that music sounds. LucasArts was another one of those companies that could make the games sound really good on 16-bit hardware. And listening to Indiana Jones' Greatest Adventures and the soundtrack for Indiana Jones on the Super Nintendo back when I was younger, it almost felt like it was the real John Williams score. Now, listening to it today, you can very clearly see that this was based on lower quality sampled instruments, and it really isn't the John Williams score. I mean, the music is there, but the overall quality, it's not anything like digital audio. But picture somebody who had just graduated from the 8-bit to 16-bit era of gaming, and picture somebody listening to the music in that 16-bit console versus the 8-bit consoles that preceded it. And I think you can kind of see why somebody could potentially think that, well, it's just dramatically better. Like the overall quality is just better. It sounds better. It sounds more real. And that's exactly what Indiana Jones gave me. And the fact that the Indiana Jones Greatest Adventures had all 3 of the Indiana Jones movies and had music from every single one of those movies recreated in digital form, I loved it. I loved playing the game. I loved listening to the game. I actually played through the game not all that long ago. I want to say maybe 2 years ago or so, I played through it again, and it can be pretty challenging. It's actually a fairly challenging game, but once you get used to it, it's still a good game. I mean, I don't know. I didn't play it to the depth that I would need to really do a full podcast episode on it. I beat the game, but I didn't really devour the game. But I will say, I still enjoyed it. It's just one of those games. It was kind of like this thing that I just enjoyed. And the music was just good. So it stands to reason that I would want to include that in this episode of LucasArts versus Sierra Online because it's simply a good soundtrack. We're going to move on to our final entry on the list because we are getting a little long on time. So our final entry, and this is our final Sierra entry, is...
We planned it, we'll make it. Our destination is a world where we could live 1,000,000 years and even more. We traveled, we battled, making our way towards the earth, across the sky. We're looking for rebirth. We are the Incas, kings and knights. We're lost, where we go we don't know. We keep on flying into the night. Inca people looking for a place to go. A journey through the Milky Way, using our own technology. Fly towards eternity, into the space. Sky riders, peace soldiers, a land of plenty's what we're looking for. Prosperity and harmony is what we need for sure. We are the Incas, kings and knights. We're lost, where we go we don't know. We keep on flying into the night. Inca people looking for a place to go. We are the Incas, kings and knights. We're lost, where we go we don't know. We keep on flying into the night. Inca people looking for a place to go. We are the Incas, kings and knights. We are lost, where we go we don't know. We keep on flying into the night. Inca people looking for a place to go. We are the Incas, kings and knights. We are lost, where we go we don't know. We keep on flying into the night. Inca people.
I have a little bit of a confession to make. This song is from the game Inca by Sierra Online. Actually, I believe it's by Cocktailvision, and it was published by Sierra Online. This song has lived within my memory ever since I first heard it. I think this is a phenomenal song. It is so catchy, despite the fact that I don't know that anybody would listen to it and think, oh, that would ever top the Billboard charts for songs, but it's something that for whatever reason wormed its way into my memory and has never let go. This song has always been there, and I dare my brother, who is Hummel728 out on Discord. You tell me, isn't it the same way for you? I know that this has to be a song that has been in your head forever. Now, I also dare you, tell me anything about the game Inca. Tell me anything you remember about the game itself. And I'm going to venture a guess and say you don't remember anything about it, because I don't remember anything about it. I have no recollection about the gameplay. The only thing I know about the game is based on research that I've done in the modern day, where I've gone back and I've watched some gameplay videos, because I did kick around the idea of doing an episode on Inca, and that may actually happen in the future. But as far as my childhood memory of Inca, the game, I have none. I have literally none. I remember the box, and I remember the box being gold, like having a gold coloring and then an image in the center of the box. And then I remember the music. I remember this song, We Are the Inca People, or Inca People, I believe it's called. And that's it. That is all I remember about the game. But the fact is, that's good enough, because for me, Inca People, that song is just so good. Why is it so good? Am I crazy? Anybody who hasn't heard the song before or hasn't played the game, or even if you have played the game and heard the song, tell me if I'm crazy. But I think this is one of the best songs ever created for a video game. I am not being hyperbolic. This is such a good song. It's so catchy. It appeals to me on so many different levels that I can't even fully articulate why it appeals to me. It starts out, I mean, you just listen to it, but then we are the Incas. And it is so good. Everything about that song is good. Oh man. Like I said, I don't remember the game at all. I literally don't remember the game, but the music, that has stuck with me. And really, isn't that kind of what it's all about? There are so many different experiences that we all have throughout our lives. And for whatever reason, different things stick with us over the years. And for me, one of the things that stick with me, probably more so than many things, is music. Music has the ability to transform your experiences. Music has the ability to whisk you away to far-off places and to immerse you in experiences that you otherwise wouldn't be immersed in. I love all forms of music. I love music in video games, and I can't wait to continue talking about music in the future. But before we get to that future, I did say that this was Sierra versus LucasArts. So that would imply that we need to declare a winner at the end of the episode, based on the songs that we chose or just in general. Who wins? Sierra versus LucasArts. Who has the best music? Well, I'm going to tell you right now that the official winner of this episode is all of us. Because I know it's a cop-out, I'm sorry. Because Sierra and LucasArts are two companies that have always delivered phenomenal experiences. They have always focused on creating meaningful and worthwhile and memorable soundtracks and themes and games. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which one anybody thinks is better. It doesn't matter whether you think Sierra is the best or LucasArts is the best or some other company is the best. The winner in all of this is all of us, because we get to experience these games, these musical pieces, these soundtracks, and collectively, they become a part of who we are. And that, above all else, is truly what makes music in video games special. That was our Sounds of the Classics episode focused on Sierra versus LucasArts. I hope you all enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you'd like to reach out, let me know how I'm doing, provide feedback, comments, suggestions, or just talk about classic games and technology in general. I would love to hear from you, and there are a few ways you can reach out. I have an X account with the handle @ClassicGamingT. I have an email address, which is classicgamingtoday@gmail.com, and we have our Discord server. The link is in the show notes. Discord is the best way to get in touch with me and the rest of the community around this podcast. We have a ton of fun out on Discord. I highly encourage you all to check it out. I also highly encourage you to check out our Patreon. It is patreon.com/ClassicGamingToday. If you want even more Classic Gaming Today goodness, including a Patreon exclusive bi-weekly podcast expansion pack, patreon.com/ClassicGamingToday is where it's at. Before we sign off for the week, I do want to mention that our next episode is going to be focused on the point-and-click adventure game Harvester, so feel free to write in if you have any particularly fond or not so fond memories of that experience. At the same time, I recognize you're likely listening to this podcast on any number of podcast engines, and if you would feel so inclined, it would be great if you could leave me a review. This is not about trying to bolster star counts. This is not about trying to harvest a ton of 5-star ratings, though if that happens, awesome, it means we're doing something right. No, what it's really all about is trying to deliver the best possible podcast I can. The only way to do that is to get feedback from all of you, the listener community, to make sure I'm hitting the mark and delivering the content you all want to listen to. We get new listeners every single day, which is simply amazing. I want to continue to grow this community and continue to make the best possible podcast I can. We'll be back in around a week with our next episode focused on Harvester. Until then, remember, sometimes the games of the past are just as good, if not better, than the games of today. Goodbye, everyone.